Good day and thank you for joining me for another 5 minute video, another period of 5 minute Bible time. Today we'll be looking at the book of 2nd Samuel. Remember, we've been coming all the way from Genesis, and now we're in the book of 2nd Samuel. These are the books of history. And in the last book, and if you need to, please check the last video we made. It should be available on the channel. We're speaking about 1st Samuel. And at the end of that book, David becomes king. Um, just picking up from the other video, this is the period, it starts in 1 Samuel 8, when Israel had demanded to have a human king. In effect, they had rejected God. So now they have their second king, who is David. And remember, this is the king over all of the land, because we later reach a period where the land divides into two. So the book of 2nd Samuel is essentially a look at Israel under the time of David's reign. And if you remember, there are a good number of times, or a couple of times, when David is somewhat, actually he was ousted from the seat of from the throne by one of his sons, Absalom, and that starts in chapter 15 of 2nd Samuel. Some things to take note of in the book of 2nd Kings. David actually becomes king over, or I should say he's anointed king over all the land in chapter 5. In chapter 2, he's anointed over Judah, that is the lower half of the land. And then in chapter 5, he becomes king over both regions. And another one to note is chapter 6, when Uzzah dies. I think many people are familiar with that, but just in case you are not, he basically touched the Ark of the Covenant while they were moving it, and God killed him for that. There's a lot that can be said about that, and it's a very good lesson to learn about the instructions of God that are meant to be followed as he has given them. From there we can consider a verse I would say maybe underline, highlight, or something. Chapter 7 verses 12 through 13. This is the promise of the seed, which is Christ, to come through the lineage of David. So that's one I would suggest highlighting or underlining in 2nd Samuel. 2nd Samuel chapter 7 verses 12 and 13. Chapter 11, I should think this one is also known to a lot of people, Bathsheba, the incident with Bathsheba. Can also look at chapter 12, where David is confronted about this issue. We've already mentioned Absalom. And then chapter 24, that is the last chapter of the book. That one gives us the sin of David, when he issues an order for a census to be taken of the fighting men of Israel. And that's an important chapter as well. I know some people have asked about that chapter as what was David's sin. The sin was David's pride in the military might of the land. In essence, he was not trusting in God anymore, but trusting in the might of his military power. That's also something we should learn. We can't trust, or we cannot put our all in all in that, we are the mightiest nation on earth, we have the strongest military, nobody can do anything. The day the military falls is going to be a very terrible day. It may seem impossible, it may seem that like something that will never happen, but we are all human. We need to remember, especially if we continue in that way, then God himself will become our enemies, and then we will know for sure that even the mightiest armies can fall. I think this lesson has been repeated throughout history. Movies have been made about those kinds of things, so we need to understand those kinds of things, not to have pride. So that's a lot maybe to give, a lot to take in, but a good summary of 2nd Samuel. It is a look or the history of Israel under the reign of David. His reign actually ends the very first chapter, or well, maybe not the very first chapter, but it shows us, it takes us towards the end of his reign, which we see ending in the first few chapters of the next book. So again, just to give that, the second Samuel shows us Israel under the reign of David. I hope this is of help to you. And remember that seed promise. Maybe that's one of the most important things to take out of the book. And yeah, I hope that takes you a long way to having a better understanding of your Bible. Enjoy your Bible studies, and thank you for joining me.